Alrighty, everybody. It is 40 minutes after the hour. Thank you so much for choosing to be here. Hello and welcome. So that you're aware, this session is being recorded. My name is Rich Frazee, and I will be the moderator for this ADEIL conference session. Before we begin, on behalf of ADEIL, thank you so much to our host, Troy University. Thank you so much to our technical coordinator, Marcy Shirley from Troy University. We are so grateful for their contributions in making this event possible. Thank you for joining us for this session, Podcasting to Increase Belonging and a Sense of Community, the Business Buzz, connected with the Forbes School of Business and Technology Center. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Joe Cappa.
Hey, everybody, and thank you very much for that introduction. Let me share my slides. So, I would like to take you for the next half hour or so and kind of give you a little bit of an insight into this project that I've been working on. Last year, presented at the ADEIL conference and was fortunate enough to be brought back. So, this presentation here is really the extension, the research I've been doing with my colleague from last year. So, what you see in front of you are the research questions that we put in front of us for this year, and they are based on: can higher education institutions increase a sense of belonging in a seamless way by using digital technology tools? And then how can online higher education institutions leverage digital technology tools to afford students, faculty, and staff the opportunity to create a sense of belonging outside of the online classroom? Sorry, that was a mouthful. I'll slow down a bit. It went a little fast there. So last year, at ADEIL, myself and another colleague presented on the idea of podcasting from a general sense. And from that, I created Dr. Kappa's podcast series. And this series went into the strategic management course that I teach here at the University of Arizona Global Campus. It's an undergraduate capstone. It's an online course, 5 weeks. I ran the podcast from February 2nd to July 29th. And I'll talk about where we went after July 29th. It was posted in my classroom as an announcement with an external link to the Spotify for Podcasters platform. So the platform was Spotify. Uh, the students didn't have to purchase Spotify. There was an external link to listen if you were not a Spotify subscriber. So, a couple of research questions that I had for this study, and I wanted to clarify the population for the study was 103 students, and that was nothing more than the actual roster sizes for all four sections during the duration of the study added together. So, it was a population of 103. This did not go beyond my class. So, the two research questions: does podcasting facilitate more flexible and mobile learning? And research question two: does the use of podcasting enhance the learning experience in the online classroom? So, for the first question, and the statistics you see here are so the great thing about using Spotify is they have a whole analytics section. So, I didn't have to really do a lot of the analytics myself. I was able to grab the analytics from Spotify, break them down, so I didn't have to really go into every podcast. I could just grab the aggregate. And two things stuck out to me, and I put them here for you guys. 49% of the students listened to podcast sessions Monday through Thursday, and then 51% would listen over the Friday, Saturday, Sunday period. Uh, Initially, I expected that to be a little bit more on the weekends and less during the week, but what I was encouraged is that the day of the week perhaps did not matter. And so it's leading me to think that the flexibility piece is not really dependent on the day. It's more of the week. It's more dependent on the fact that the learning or the podcast is flexible and it can be used in different modalities. And that kind of leads me into this. So if you look at this here, you can see 24% of all of the listeners went directly to Spotify, and found the podcast and listened. 67% went to, so Spotify has two ways you can find a podcast. The first way is through the Spotify itself. The second way is Spotify for podcasters, which is a direct link to the podcast. And then the third way is, as I said, the non Spotify, you can use your web browser. So this was interesting. I thought I would have more students listening on their web browser, but I was encouraged that a larger percent went into Spotify because what I am surmising from that is that meant they are listening from some type of mobile device, phone, an iPad, or even if they have their laptop or MacBook with them. So at this point, from a flexibility standpoint, I'm confident that it is a flexible learning tool for students, and they are taking advantage of the flexibility going out of the LMS. Like I had said when I started, the only way this was in the LMS was as a course announcement with the link. Once they clicked the link, it was completely outside of the LMS. From a learning perspective, the Business 402 course that I teach has 6 course learning outcomes. I do a total of 4 podcasts. 3 of the podcasts encompassed all 5 of the course, or 5 of the 6 course learning outcomes. I do an introductory welcome podcast that does not connect any of the course outcomes. It's just a welcome and kind of giving them a breakdown of why it's important to take a capstone course, the benefits, and so on. So as I said, 3 of the 4 episodes cover 5 of the course learning outcomes. And interestingly, course learning outcome number 5 had the highest participation rate, and course learning outcome number 1 had the lowest. Now, I didn't have any preconceived notions of how that would break down. It's just interesting now that I see, as I was going through the research, the results, that the 5th one had the most and the first one had the least. And here's the breakdown of what those course learning outcomes are. So the encouraging thing here is the outcome of the course is to develop a strategic plan. So course learning outcome 5 is really central to the course. The final deliverable is a completed strategic plan. So I am encouraged they were getting are connecting rather with that course learning outcome in the episode 4 podcast, which is not revealed to them till week 4 of the week 5 course. So even though the course is moving towards the end, they're still taking the time to listen to the podcast. The other one, the external environment in the organization, podcast episode 2, really is the introduction to the SWOT analysis, Porter's 5 forces, PESTEL. And so, again, encourage that the students are taking time with the second podcast to listen to it. I wish they would spend a little more time on the mission statement, episode 3, but we'll work on it. That had the lowest, as so far you can see, the lowest amount of interaction, but more to come on that. Well, I'll probably rework that podcast at some point to try to get that to maybe try to drive some traction there. So why am I sharing this, and where did this go? And there was an error on my slide. I apologize. So this was the study that I had been doing from February to July. So we got to the end of July, and I was working with my co-presenter here, Dr. Ashley Dellosa. And because this was just in my classroom, we wanted to see if we could expand this beyond just Business 402, which is just taught by me. And she was able to work with me and the full-time faculty in that program. And we have started to expand from the classroom to the entire BA program. And therefore, that's why you see the renaming. So it doesn't mean that my classroom podcast has gone away. It just means that that podcast will just live and stay in my classroom only, and I will still continue to run it. But the new project we have is expanding to the entire Bachelor of Art Business Administration program with Dr. Dellosa and I as host and co-host of this Business Buzz Technology Corner podcast. Still going through the Spotify platform, and we are considering this a pilot because, again, we just started in July. And so far, up to the 10th, we've only had 25 students participate. However, we're okay with that because we are being deliberate with how we distribute this. We're being deliberate with how we share it out. We're making sure that we are working with both full-time and associate faculty to have them uh, kind of embrace the idea here of why we want them to post that announcement. So it's all a voluntary, well, we're asking, but it's a voluntary posting of the announcement now in the classroom. So we're working with that group, and we are hoping as we continue to do this that we will get uh, uh, greater participation. But for the first pilot, for the first few out there, I'm very happy with 25. I expected actually a little bit less, so I'm happy with where we're at. Again, just to show that um, even higher numbers here where the students are actually taking this from Spotify and not necessarily at the web browser. So still encourage that they are using different ways to listen. So where is this leading and why am I putting the discussion piece right here? I wanted to share this with you guys because I'm hoping that I am uh, able to come back next year because the plan is to move the Business Buzz from just being in the room to being more on the Forbes webpage. So if a student went to the Forbes School of Business external webpage, where our plan is to get a podcast home space where then students can then go to and look at, and not only students, but staff and faculty and others can go to that section and listen to the podcast. So that will be the final phase of the pilot, is to expand this out to more listeners, again, through not only through a classroom announcement, but also through a web a home space on the web. And I'm going to go back to the question first from Ariel. So the curriculum, that's the question. The curriculum is this is the curriculum given to me, so I don't really have any control over the curriculum. I basically create the podcasts based on what I want the student to share with the students. And when I do the podcast, there is no real mention of course tasks. There's no real mention of learning outcomes. It is a free-flowing discussion connecting current events to topics like this. So it's not really um, I guess this was an unintended consequence of getting the topics for the podcast connected to um, the learning outcomes. In terms of the core content, we in the classroom, I have announcements that are in there that are related to uh, external research, the course topics, how to connect the business topics in the course with the course material, back to topics, both academic research and what's going on in the current environment itself. I think that might have answered your question, although I'm not sure. I apologize. Um, if when we get to the time after, we can go back and see if I covered that. I would be happy to talk a little bit more about that. Um, just to give you guys, so this is based on research. This is the literature review. I looked at three areas: digital technology tools, sense of belonging, and then podcasting itself. I know my time is running short here, so I will go through this a bit quicker to leave time for questions. So I focused on, from the digital technology standpoint, I focused on looking at a lot of research on Industry 4.0 and connecting that back to digital technology tools and higher education as well. I also looked at digitization and where and how institutions are trying to incorporate digital technology as part of what you see here as Education 4.0. So kind of similar to Industry 4.0, right? The digitization of higher education, if you will. Then moving to a sense of belonging, I really looked at how do you improve the sense of belonging, not only for the student, but for the faculty, for the staff, for the entire online experience, so that it doesn't feel like it's just a course without any real connection. So this really is where the sense of belonging comes in. While this is a curriculum related, some curriculum related research type stuff here, what I looked at is how much, and when I was going through the research, where could we connect the students to the curriculum by using the podcast. And I know I teach the capstone, so the thinking might be, well, they're at the end of the program. But the good thing here is that we have students that will move through to the master's program at the MBA after the capstone. So podcasting research really just kind of focused on what is going on in the current space with podcasting right now. I'd like to focus on this comment by Drew at the bottom. The findings from Drew revealed there are three categories of educational podcasting: the quick burst, the narrative, and the chat show. I am leaning more towards the chat show in my podcast. It's really 15 to 20 minutes, 30, no more than 30 minutes tops. Uh, and again, it's just more of me just kind of chatting. Perhaps it's a combination of the narrative and the chat show, but it really is unscripted, no slides, just me talking with a podcast, like you have kind of breaks and musical and so on. So that's really all of it. So that was, yeah. So I would love to. So I want to, Ariel, I want to follow up on your question. I think that is a great question about the audience. And so what I do is each podcast. So in the 15-minute podcast, it's 3 minutes of me talking, stop, a minute break. 3 minutes of me talking, stop, musical break. 3 minutes. So what I will tell them is in that short snippet, I give them just enough to hopefully keep their attention. Then I stop and do like a musical. Spotify has this way you can break the podcast out, and I come back and do another 3 minutes. So within that 15 to 20 minute podcast, there might be 6 to 7 individual short little sessions. And so that is why what I do is a little bit different than a traditional podcast, because like I'm not talking for these long lengths of time. So Spotify does, Ariel. So as I go into Spotify for podcasters analytics has all kinds of analytics I could break down for exactly what you're talking about. Yes, yes, Kate.
Sorry, didn't want to stop you mid-flow there. Thanks so much for this, Joe. I found it really interesting. I'm in a completely different field from you. I teach diplomacy, but I wanted to come along because I've been using podcasts for a while too, in a couple of different ways. So one of the things I've noticed in my LMS or my VLE, depending on your acronyms, is that I routinely set podcasts produced by outside organizations as my reading for the week, in part because diplomats quite frequently are on podcasts to talk about, recent bilateral developments or whatever else. And I notice in my VLE that the participation, as in the number of people who actually listen to it in full, is higher than for reading. In other words, the students seem to prefer to listen than they do
Yep.
to read. And that's, I try to be intentional.
Absolutely. No, she's absolutely correct. Uh, and
Yeah, well,
yeah, no, you're absolutely correct.
So I think also it's really
Either she froze
interesting.
or I froze. I think I'm
The
froze.
Oh, are we back? I think we're good. But your literature idea is interesting that we're
I
using it quite
apologize. I think I'm
informally. We good?
Thanks everyone for bearing with the internet hiccups.
I think he's hopped off. Never mind.
Yep. No, it's okay. Well, hopefully we'll see if he's back in the. I would get he mentioned a little bit of internet issues, and my guess is he's perhaps logging off and logging back in, and here he is
Ta-da!
now.
so I want to go back to what two things. So Kate, absolutely. What I have found is that students. So the last assignment is a strategic plan, and I send all this research to them. And wouldn't you know it, most of them listen to the darn podcast, and that's how they approach the assignment. I'm like, I've wasted. So I feel like I sent all this stuff to them, but they want that 15 minutes from me helps them work through that final assignment. I like it, but it surprises me. I'm like, why wouldn't you go to the research first? And Ariel, to your point, I never expected that students would gain or improve on the course learning outcomes just from sharing or listening to that podcast. I just thought it would be this extra thing. And I never expected to have, of that 103 students, I had about 75 over those from February to July, listen to at least one session. That shocked me because I have a hard enough to read the announcements, right? And I'm like, so that means they read the announcement, downloaded the podcast, listened to it, at least 75 unique users for absolutely are connect up. Because yeah, going to continue to do this and figure out ways to continue to incorporate podcasting. I like it. I think it is a benefit for the students. I don't think it's a replacement for anything. I just think it's a supplement that they can use and we can help them kind of, I hate to use the word learn on the go, but really that's what it is. So I want to comment one more thing on Ariel, what you said. That is what I am missing. So like I am missing the student feedback piece. I asked them, would you guys please share feedback on the podcast? I get very little other than I don't have Spotify. What do I do? Or um, can you do more of these? But I don't get that. I don't get that other piece that I'm looking for on what should I do different? Should I do less of something and more of something?
I may follow up. One thing I noticed, because I started making podcasts for my class 5 or 6 years ago, and I noticed a massive difference when I really capped it at 10 minutes. The engagement, just to come back to Ariel's point in the chat box, when I expressly said the podcast is a maximum of 10 minutes and I used it to address, muddy points, thorny issues. Yeah, it was just free flowing chat from me, but it was addressing the issues that had cropped up either in the asynchronous or the synchronous sessions. And I said it's 10 minutes. The user rate went through the roof. In the
You know,
past, it had been like 20, and
yeah,
apparently it makes a difference.
yeah, I'm gonna consider that. And I do have to say, and she's here and her camera's off and she's on silent, but I have to give a lot of credit to Dr. Connie Lauer. She has been even though she's in the School of Education, she is a huge supporter and has helped me immensely. So, Dr. Connie, thank you for doing this stuff and continuing to support me to get us to this point. So I had to share that. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I had to say thank you for continuing to support us, folks, and get these podcasts going. I will continue to do. So the one concern I have with Spotify is I keep getting requests from them to monetize the podcast. That is not my intention. I'm not monetizing. I'm not putting ads. I'm not. So to your point, Ariel, some of the analytics I shy away from, because some of them are geared towards, if you want to make this a business, and that is not my intent. So I take it with a grain of salt, because you could put at the end of the podcast through Spotify, I could put a real quick 2-question survey. However, I don't do that, because I would have to go through the institution's review process and make sure the survey is approved and so on. So right now, I just ask them for the anecdotal feedback through an email comment or end of course survey comment. But yeah, so that's the other thing too. You're right, Ariel. I haven't dipped my toe into the AI yet in terms of improving my podcast. I'm still trying to find my way to make sure that I'm engaging with them and I'm not losing them. So hopefully that will come. But I'm sold, right? And I've had folks say, "Well, gee, you're just an associate faculty. This is out of your scope." It is, but it's not a lot of work. It's not. I know it might sound like a lot, but it isn't. For me to talk for 15 minutes and to record it once a week, or to even pre-record a couple of them and drop them in, if you like it, I guess if you're passionate about it, it's not a lot of work. So I would never make it a requirement. But if faculty, and Connie knows this, if faculty want to do it, it's absolutely not as time consuming as we might all think.
Speaking of
Yeah,
requirements, I'm thinking about flipping it. Do you ever have your students then use the podcast form as a form of assessment?
We're not there yet. And
Okay.
so Connie, you should probably write that down. We're not there yet, but that might be a future project for us. We're trying to get more folks to dip their toe into the podcast world to do it,
Hmm.
but we're not there yet. But hopefully we will be.
And Kate, it looked like you were about to say something.
yeah, I'm so enjoying this conversation. It's great.
Yeah.
So you had really great empirical data there, Joe, to, support your arguments. I don't. But one of the things I would say to your point about it not taking much time is that I find it's actually way quicker for me to make a podcast and address all the issues that my students kicked up than answer millions of comments on the VLE or emails or whatever else.
Absolutely, Kate. So that final assignment is probably the most difficult in the capstone. I can get more done in a 15 to 20-minute podcast for that entire class than I can to go back and answer the same 30 times. Because that's literally what I'll get, the same question. I typically have 30 to 37, 30 to 35, sometimes 37 students. I'll answer that same question, or I can just put it in a podcast. And the other thing I want to talk to you about, Ariel, you are 100% correct. I believe we are tapping into that social media aspect when you call it a podcast that doesn't make it feel like a school type thing. If we call it a podcast, if you call it this, if you throw it into Spotify, if you do it into stuff or Apple that they already do, it's not really like school like stuff, right? And so that is the other reason why I don't script, why there's no course related stuff. It's just me. Why I don't correct the mistakes. I have made mistakes, and at the end of the podcast, I'll go, well, you can excuse those, and it's just me. I'm in my basement. I'm doing all this. That's on purpose, right? It's on purpose to bring the realism piece and not make it feel rigid like it's a class, if that makes sense. So I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you all. And I will put my email in here if you guys want to connect up as well. It's joseph.kappa@uagc.edu. Would love to work with anybody on any other podcast related stuff. Joseph.kappa@uagc.edu. There you
That
go.
is a perfect transition, as I now have to be the bad guy. Just love the spirited discussion this has been having. This has been phenomenal. But I have to be the bad guy and turn off the lights and send people to their next session. But thank you so much, Joe, for your
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. No, this has been phenomenal back and forth.